Hello, I'm Lowell, pronouns he, him, and welcome to another episode of the Open Hearth podcast. This show draws on the experience and play of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. We're an online RPG gaming group, which has a lot of different games and gaming, story games, OSR, solo, and more. And really importantly, we use safety tools for all play in the community. As usual, we brought on a couple of people who've been community members associated, affiliated in the general sphere of our community here to discuss the recent gaming and drill down to talk about a game they've played. And we've got a particular goal that I've asked Josh to talk about. So we have Becky Annison, who is the designer of Wreck This Deck, Lovecraft-esque, and Bite Marks, which is a PBTA game that is talked about constantly in our community. People are always talking about how much they love it. You also did When the Dark Is Gone from Seven Wonders, which is one of my absolute favorite games. I love that anthology, and that I think one of the strongest ones in there. So we're really glad to have you on.
Thank you.
And the other part of Black Armada Games, Josh Fox, Lovecraft-esque again, and Flotsam, and Last Fleet, and a bunch of other things. Josh, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
And so, listeners, in our first segment, we're going to go around, have everyone tell us about how the recent gaming has gone. And then we're going to talk about a particular game that they want to drill into. So, Josh, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about Chiron's Doom. It's a solo journaling game. I think this is kind of a relatively new thing I'm seeing as people kind of doing solo forward or something like that. You can play it solo, but you can play it in a group as well. And so we played Chiron's Doom with a group. And this is quite a fascinating experience because I think it might be the first time that I have played like a group TTRPG that's kind of prompt driven in that way. I guess maybe For the Queen counts. The game uses standard playing cards to generate prompts, and it's got side decks which you shuffle in, got a little bit of complexity to it than the typical just run through a deck type of game. For those who don't know it, you're explorers investigating this massive alien monolith, this monument, which contains all sorts of secrets. And depending on how your deck pans out, it's going to be kind of revealing the secrets of the group and the characters, as well as the secrets of the monument, which I really love. We wove a really doomy story of these kind of interconnected characters from gothic grimdark house with returning, although not everybody knew that they were returning for a second time to this monument, and discovering all kinds of horrors there, which ultimately led to quite a Lovecraft-esque sort of ending with a real horrific reveal at the end. I had a great time with that. Recommend it.
Anything else you've been playing recently that you want to give a shout out to?
I have been reading a lot of Forged in the Dark recently. So I've read A State, Slug Blaster, Bump in the Dark, Band of Blades, and all of this is kind of stuff I've been frothing about in my mind as I've been thinking about game design. I wanted to mention it because A State in particular has quite an interesting set of rules for kind of mechanizing the ongoing development of plot in your campaign, like driving forward threats and problems and advancing the state of the art from like Blades in the Dark, where you've basically got a bunch of clocks and you're like, oh, I'll pick a few things from my book and put some clocks on them, to something a bit more sophisticated that gives the GM a little mini game to play, which I think is quite cute. And we're going to talk about my game Ex Tenebris in a bit, and some of those ideas have filtered into that. Just generally, I found it quite interesting to look at the different ways that people have handled Forged in the Dark and how much variety there is in those spaces.
And you've given me the transition. You have a Kickstarter campaign that, as of recording, is in progress, and hopefully, as of release of the episode, is in. It's one that I've been super excited about. It's really striking. It's a kind of game that's very much in my wheelhouse. You have one of the most visually arresting Kickstarter pages. The color choice that's there, the art that's there. Ex Tenebris. Tell us about this game, what the pitch is, and what people should know.
Ex Tenebris is a star-spanning Gothic investigation TTRPG. You play the Guardians of Moira, which is like an interstellar agency protecting people against demons and other horrifying supernatural threats. And you'll be facing sorcerers, you'll be facing cults, weird ancient sentient relics, alien infiltrators, all the kind of juicy stuff that you'd hope for from a expansive science fiction universe. It uses a emergent mystery system, which is rooted in the kind of stuff you see from Carved and Brindlewood or Apocalypse Keys, all of those sorts of games. But I've evolved it. I've reincorporated some of the DNA from Lovecraft-esque, which is another one of our games. And so it's got this brand new system called Spawned from the Tenebrium. The Tenebrium being the nightmare realm that exists in this universe. It combines that kind of evolved emergent mystery system with some quite nice narrative yet tactical rules for dealing with the set piece kind of action sequences that I want to see in this game. That's not a very pithy pitch. I should have got better at this by now.
No, but it is comprehensive. So, what should people know going into this about mechanically what it's similar to, and then more of the details of the setting?
So I maybe hinted a bit at this when I mentioned Forge in the Dark earlier, and it does incorporate DNA from PBTA and Forge in the Dark. For people who are familiar with Carl from Brindlewood games, it will seem very familiar. You are generating clues from a scenario. You are theorizing to bring those clues together into an explanation and a finale, but it's got a bunch of extra technology to scaffold that and bring it together and make it feel a bit more real so that it's less simulating a TV show and more simulating a role-playing mystery such as you might have in a traditional GM'd game. It comes with a 2d10 based system, which will feel very familiar to PBTA folks, but it also has the downtime mechanics and campaign length stuff and team mechanics that you get from Forged in the Dark.
What I think is interesting about Spawned from the Tenebrium, the system, is the way it very much plays to how you and I like mysteries to run. One of the things that's really good about the Carved and Brindlewood system is it encourages this kind of writer's room where you've got your clues, you sit down together and you work out how you think the clues will go. And there is, I think I'm right in saying there's permission to sort of rewrite and recontextualize to make it fit. And I think that's really, really good at what it does. The itch that Josh and I like to scratch is very different. We want to be presented with the clues and we want there to be a solution which perfectly fits the clues. On a personal level, I feel like if I'm rewriting a clue, I'm cheating. And there should be a place that that clue fits. And so we wrote Spawned in the Tenebrium and we brought back in from Lovecraft-esque the way that you keep a theorizing momentum going all the way through. Because instead of theorizing only when you're doing your big rolls, you're theorizing all the way through. It's much easier to incorporate the clues as you go. The fun of updating your theory, as you do in Lovecraft-esque after every scene, was really important to us. The other thing that we were both hankering after, I think, is this idea of, okay, I think I've got my solution. I want to have the big final climactic scene, but I want there to be a little bit of technical crunch. I want that big final fight to feel a bit like a boss fight. And so that was drawing on more Forged in the Dark elements, a satisfying boss fight after my theorizing.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I want to mention is the way the system bridges between PBTA and Forged in the Dark, because this is a particular thing that I wanted to do. So I find with PBTA, which I love, you have individual moves that are very tightly defined and provide very tight inputs and outputs for your role, which are brilliant in terms of defining how the genre goes, but kind of narrow the focus quite a bit. Forge in the Dark gives you just a single role mechanic that is incredibly broad and then leaves you to designing your own PBTA move on the fly as you're trying to answer each individual role. And so what I've tried to do, I've invented something called sitches. You basically make a Forge in the Dark style role, but then you plug a sitch in, which is kind of like a move from PBTA, but it's more flexible. So you can kind of say, okay, this is a fight that I'm in right now. I'm going to use my fight sitch. I can see what the default set of good stuff and bad stuff that you might get out of a roll is, but I've got pick lists of other stuff that I can plug in. I can even mix it in with another move. I can say, oh, this is a fight scene, but it involves magic, so I'm going to use my medal sitch as well. I'm going to bring in consequences from the medal sitch. So it's kind of giving the GM a structured palette for generating the consequences, which are kind of given to you on a plate in PBTA and which are left for you to just entirely make up from whole cloth in Forged in the Dark. So I'm kind of bridging that difference there.
What kind of mysteries are we dealing with? What's the setting and what's the thing that we're going to be doing here?
You're working for Moira. It's a government agency, basically, but it's like the lowest status government agency imaginable. You don't have very many resources. Nobody really knows who you are. As far as people are concerned, you're just kind of intergalactic rat catchers. Because of that, your character as these kind of flawed diamonds, people who've been brought in from other walks of life who couldn't quite cut it in whatever walk of life they were before. So you might be a soldier who was too traumatized by war to continue fighting, or a sorcerer who never got their proper training, those sorts of concepts. Your job as Moira is to protect the people of the Republic of Stars from supernatural threats. So you're going to go out and you're looking for the cults that are on their way to summoning something awful out of the Tenebrium. You're looking for demons. You're looking for alien relics. Those are the kinds of mysteries you're exploring, the kind of lurking threats which would enslave people or kill them or infiltrate the society of the Republic of Stars with something sinister that's going to undermine their way of life. You'll be using supernatural investigation tools. You'll be using mundane investigation tools. You'll be using science and technology. It's a universe where you've got technology and magic kind of going hand in hand.
Talk about the art. It's brilliant. It's one of the smartest choices of artist to tone and topic that I've seen. It's really dynamite.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's Juan Ochoa who we have for this project, and Juan obviously is an amazing artist. You can see his work in all sorts of indie games, and we love it. He has produced 2 amazing covers for us because we're producing 2 books. We've got a core book, which is everything you need to play the game, plus enough scenarios to run, I would say, like a short campaign, maybe a medium-length campaign. And then you've got the campaign book, which gives you expanded setting, some expanded campaign mechanics, and more scenarios than you can shake a stick at so that you can play this game for as long as you want. You're never going to run out. Because we're doing these 2 books, that enabled us to commission Juan to do 2 covers, which I'm very pleased with. You've got to go to the Kickstarter page to see them, obviously. It's impossible for me to describe them with words, but they are amazingly cool metal, horror vibed, monstrous invasion type of images. And we've got a vast amount of art coming out of Juan. He's really outdone himself in terms of producing stuff which brings to life the Gothic setting and brings to life the horror and magic and technology of this setting. The thing that we really want people to get excited about is the slipcase set. That is the reward that brings together everything that we wanted to make. That's going to give you the 2 books I've just mentioned in a gorgeous foiled slipcase, which Nathan Paoletta has done the graphic design for it. So it's this fantastic ritual circle with technological elements coming in at foil on a black slipcase. And that will also come with a campaign map, which we have hired Jog Brogshin, who's Crit Award nominated cartographer. He does the most amazing maps, and he's going to produce a sort of galactic map for us to go with the 2 books. If you're all in, that's the place to go. It's £95, which I think is 125 US dollars, something like that. There are options to just get the 2 books, which will come with a PDF of the campaign book, so you're not missing out there. And obviously we have a PDF tier as well, which is very reasonably priced.
Josh, do you want to talk about the team of writers?
We've got Chirag Asnani, who is writing a scenario about racing spaceships. We've got Sarah Doom, who is doing a thing about a weird upside down black cathedral with an ossuary in it, maybe like a bone god or something like this. Really amazingly gothic and metal, as you would expect from Sarah. We've got Kieran Gillen, who's writing something he described as being the Wicker Man in space. Most exciting for me, we've got Yoon-Ha Lee, who is the author of Nine Fox Gambit and the Machineries of Empire books, which is a direct inspiration from some of the ideas in the game. I've ripped the idea of the Black Cradle and Jadao from those books and put them in as an archetype that you can play. So I'm really happy that Yoon is writing for us, and Yoon is going to be doing a scenario about dueling fashion houses with hidden cults inside. And we've got a bunch more. I can't cover them all.
This sounds amazing. Full disclosure, I already backed this day one, so is definitely excited about this. Anything else you want to say about Ex Tenebris?
One of the things that I really wanted to do with this game is a team game. I didn't want it to be one of those games where you're playing a team, but you just make your characters individually and then kind of throw them together. So there's a bunch of mechanics in the game to help you bring your team together from the start, as well as choosing an archetype, which is kind of like a playbook for your character. You will also choose a role, and the role is something like I'm the leader, or I am the loyal follower, or I'm the rebellious one who never does what they're told, or I'm the one who takes the really tough decisions and does the really grim stuff when other people haven't quite got the will to do it. You select them together as a group. You avoid that situation where 3 people think they're the leader, or nobody thinks they're the leader, or everybody thinks they're the rebel and nobody's willing to be rebelled against. Those kind of situations don't arise because you kind of discuss the team dynamics at the beginning and choose a role to suit. And your relationship questions, which come from your role rather than your archetype, so that you're asking questions of each other that are connected to how you fit together as a team and what your team dynamics are.
That sounds amazing.
And you also create team flashbacks as part of your character creation. After every mission, you will create a new flashback that fleshes out the background of your team and the things that you've done together, so that as you're playing through your future, you're also developing your past.
I love that. One of the things about all of your games is you always bring really new and interesting tools and approaches that I can immediately see how those get adapted elsewhere. It's really, really smart. So I'm very excited about the campaign. It has funded. I'm hoping that if people haven't already backed it, they go and back it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Becky, tell us about your recent gaming.
The games I played most recently, obviously a lot of playtesting of Ex Tenebris, but I've also finished a run of the solo journaling game, The Almanac of the Sanguine Paths by Rory Montford, which was very, very enjoyable. Lots and lots of fun. I'm currently in an Open Hearth game. I'm playing Dig Two Graves using the Chasing Adventure system by Spencer Moore. So shout out to my amazing Open Hearth buddies who I'm playing in that with. You're all awesome. And I'm also running a game of Wise Women by Alexandra Brockman, which is the game I was going to talk about in a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
So that's a PBTA game. I just think it's got such a grabby setting, basically. You are playing a coven of witches in a very rural community in sort of Eastern Europe, pre-industrial setting, so technology is not very advanced. You're living in this tiny community in the middle of probably quite a hostile landscape. There's almost certainly a dark forest. The winters are very harsh. And I think that's what makes it so interesting. And what the game really drills down into is that you're playing a coven of witches, but you are so much a part of the social fabric of this place. There isn't oh, well, if people are horrible to me, I'll just leave and go. Because A, you might not have anywhere to go to. The landscape is really hostile. B, there's people here who you care about. Your relationship with the community matters. But magic is really frowned on. There's a strict set of social rules that you have to comply with, and there'll be consequences if you don't. There'll be problems with your status, and that will impact how you interact with other characters. And I think the tension of creating a character who exists outside the social norms in that way, but has to be a part of the community that they're in, is really interesting. And the game background does a lot to support it, and the system does some really interesting things to support it. So that's kind of one of the things that I enjoyed about it. Obviously, PBTA system, so that'd be very familiar, I'd imagine, to the listenership. Then the other thing that's really interesting about the game is that there's obviously a huge amount of lore on herbs. You're doing herb-based magic, so there's a lot of setting on the herbs and the magical spells that you might use those herbs to do, and you'll be wanting to use magic to solve the problems that come up in the village. But obviously, if you roll poorly, that's probably going to create more problems. Or maybe if you roll well, that's going to create more problems. Lovely. But the other thing I really enjoyed reading the game in particular and now playing it is there's a large section of, I suppose, a bestiary, if you like, of some of the things that are causing you problems in the village are supernatural. But it contains an awful lot of Eastern European folklore creatures, which I wasn't familiar with at all. I mean, the Rusalka, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I've heard of that particular piece of folklore. But there's a huge amount of other Eastern European folklore drawing on lots of different traditions that I've never come across, I'd never heard of. And that was really enjoyable to me, to see wildly different interpretations of folkloric creatures. And that felt interesting and really new. I think the other thing that I've found as well going through, there's some really great guidance on how you build out your village, your community, and who's in the community. So you're feeling like you have created a living, breathing social world that you have a place in and that matters. I think, as with all of these things, the problem you have when you're a game designer is you can't read a game and you can't play a game without thinking about it in the context of your own design work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like double-edged sword, you know? One of the joys, I think, is reading or playing a game. And as Josh was saying, having it change the way you're thinking about your own design, not necessarily because this game tells you to do a thing, but because it sparks those kind of interesting ideas and thoughts within yourself. And there was certainly a point where I was going through Wise Women, we were doing all the setup in the background, creating the village. One of the things that was really beautifully articulated in the book, but sort of narratively, was this idea of you may have characters who start out as antagonists, but what is sympathetic about them? You know, in order to try and make these well-rounded characters. And then as you start to think around, okay, well, somebody starts out in the bucket of antagonist, and then you discover more information which makes them seem sympathetic. And maybe now they move into the bucket of person you need to help save. And so it got me thinking about how creating NPCs in that social way, which I find so interesting, but then finding ways to move those NPCs out of the story bucket they're currently sitting in, moving them into a different story bucket and making that transition, you know, codifying that somehow, making that a kind of a part of the game world, sparks an awful lot of ideas in me for my next game that I'm designing.
I played a campaign of Wise Women. We really enjoyed it. One of the things that we ended up doing was tweaking the herbal system because it's so interesting, and we put a little more utility in it and a little more ease of player character access to it because that was what everybody really loved. What do you find that the players are gravitating to or are really interested in as you're playing through this?
Knowing the people I'm playing with love you all. I knew before I even invited them into the game that what they were going to be interested about most was creating this living, breathing social world and then finding ways to mess it up and to make the relationships more complicated. And one of the things that my home group is particularly good at is seeding everything liberally with story hooks that you may never use, but having a very, very fertile ground. So there are plenty of story hooks that you can use. And I think that because it's in this enclosed environment, this closed off community,
Mm-hmm.
you can make the seed bed of the story hooks so rich, and that's absolutely what my players have gravitated towards. It is, you know, who's having an affair with who murdered their husband to inherit the business, who knows that they did it, all of this sort of messy human relationships. I think this game allows you to really amp that up if you've got players who like that sort of thing because of this tiny little community where people can't get away from each other.
Awesome. Josh, I'm going to throw to you now if there's a question or a comment that you want to make about Wise Women.
I'm jealous. I don't know why I'm not playing this game. It's very upsetting to me.
Sherry and I have the same interaction relation when we're not in each other's campaigns, so I understand this.
Right, exactly. I don't see why anyone should do any gaming that doesn't involve me, quite frankly. What does the game do to encourage that creation of the bubbling, frothing, social awfulness that you just described?
So there's a couple of really good chapters on how you create the characters and how you can seed the ideas, but there's also the status system, I think, probably plays into that really nicely. So anytime you have an interaction with NPCs, at various points you might have to roll on status, and they will react to you differently depending on how much status you might have and how your roles. You can absolutely see, you know, future roles can affect your status. Being seen doing magic will affect your status, and then that will change your relationship with people in the village. And that's one of the things that I really love. And I think some other systems fall down because you create a really, really rich setup, but then there's nothing in the mechanics that change that as you go through the story. And it's ridiculous that the events of the story wouldn't change and evolve and move relationships. But there is a mechanic in Wise Women which does that, which I think is really good.
I really like the idea that changes and interactions play off your status and are different depending on what your status is. That's really interesting. It will mean that each character's getting a slightly different experience of the game as a result, which is always fun.
Yeah, Wise Women is great. So my recent gaming, my trad is Mutants and Masterminds. That's our home group. That's going well. I've just read the new 4th edition of that, and we're looking at moving over to that version. One of those, oh, well, I have all the books of the previous edition. Do I really want to go over the new one? I've also been running Rapscallion and been playing Band of Blades, a couple of people's play tests. And I've read a bunch of stuff recently looking forward, like the new 13th Age and Shadow of the Weird Wizard, Fragged Empire. I also read Daggerfall. Those are all interesting, more trad indie, that kind of mix of things. But what I want to talk about is Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition. And this is the new edition that came out, I think, last year for the Star Trek Adventures game. I had run quite a bit in the 1st edition of Star Trek Adventures. This is a 2D20 game from Modiphius. I've run several different games from them, Fallout and Dune and things like that. And I like it, the system. And I want to talk about right now, particularly what this new edition of Star Trek Adventures has done, why I find it a little more appealing. Somewhere down the line, I may come back in another episode and talk about the actual campaigns, because I'm doing a couple of parallel series. I'm doing one that's set in a space station. I'm doing another one that's in the original series versus next gen era. And that's been interesting. So this is 2D20. This is a system that Modiphius has used for years. Achtung Cthulhu and Mutant Chronicles and Dreams and Machines, all of those kinds of things. They've simplified a lot in this. They've consolidated things from the various source books that they had for 1st edition into this without overcomplicating things. And most importantly, they took out the challenge dice. In previous edition of 2D20, because they still use this for some of the other games, you've got D6s that are used to resolve how much effect you have. They're effectively damage dice or effect dice. And these were non-standard D6s. And I understand why you would have non-standard D6s, because they're kind of cool and you can sell a set of them. And I bought a bunch of them. But once you've removed them from the game, you realize how much they were getting in the way. For resolving any particular action, it created a whole secondary set of things you had to stop, roll, figure out, and count. Because one of the things is 2D20 is actually, what am I going to roll with? I have a number of tools that I can use to change that roll. Do I want to use those? Now I've rolled it. I get an effect number. And if I've met the effect number and have more, I can spend some other things to do additional successes. So any particular resolution roll is actually kind of thick. And so when you have that, and then you had another roll with it, it became a problem. I like them getting that out of the way. Dune had done that, but the new Star Trek Adventures doesn't have the weird approach to assets and zones that Dune did for dueling and things. And it really simplifies. I think it really strips the game down. It feels better. There's an economy where you generate momentum. Basically, if you get extra successes on a roll, you can spend them to do things like ask a question or create a trait or increase the effect of it. But you can also put that momentum into a pool that people can draw on to get extra dice on their following rolls. I don't know what it is, but the economy feels better now. It feels tighter. People are more going to it. They're recognizing that that's available to them. And there's a GM side threat, which they get a certain amount at the start. And then players can also give you threat. And again, I don't know what it is, but players are more engaging with that than I have when I ran 1st edition. Players are more willing to, okay, I'm going to take the risk to give you threat. I'm going to spend the momentum. It definitely feels like the players have more clarity about how the system operates, about what their choices are, and I've really enjoyed that. One particular sticking point before was I always steered away from starship combat in Star Trek when I ran it, because it was complicated, and when I ran it, it took a lot of time and actions and energy to resolve any particular combat. But I've done a couple of starship fights with the new system, and it really does simulate that feeling of players are at a station, you're the tactical station, or you're the engineering station, or you're the captain's station, and you have choices. Every one of those stations has things they can do. They have choices that can matter. They can help each other out. It's run smoothly. Can I run in usually 3 hours? I want a Starship Combat to fall either into a 1 hour or a 90-minute block. Like, that's absolutely what I want. And I've been able to do that. And people have come away feeling very satisfied. Like, everyone got to do stuff, and there's enough space that they could narrate what they're doing and give some RP elements. We've really enjoyed that. And it's lent itself to the way that I run Star Trek, which is basically each mission is 2 sessions. So between the 2 sessions, that's the mid-episode commercial break. And I can have the teaser. We can have flashback moments. We really lean into it being a drama. Sometimes if we make a mistake, I'll say, well, the people on the boards are going to find out what we did, and they're going to write up corrections for us. We've got the fan theories and things like that. So we really do talk about that. We describe stuff as, having the matte painting in the background. We lean into that. So it's been fun. The station game is maybe a little bit darker, but it is a hopeful game, which I think people enjoy playing in that. I'm really liking the new edition. And I didn't want to because I had spent so much money on the first edition books. But the first edition books actually are very compatible. I can draw things from those pretty easily. I don't know if you've played 2D20 or have any interest in Star Trek at all.
I think we both love Star Trek. I have shied away from Star Trek Adventures because the idea of playing Star Trek very much appeals to me. But everything I'd heard was that it was a bit too crunchy for my taste. So everything that you've been saying has been quite, it sounds like they've really worked out how to make it more slick and accessible, which is really cool. A thing that I really like about Star Trek is that kind of thing of you come across a weird alien or a particular planet with a situation. What does the game do to help you make that happen and capture that feel of the strange bit of science fiction of the episode that you're going to engage with?
Certainly there's the ability to hypothesize and come up with solutions, and the game has roles for that. It kind of steals from PBTA and maybe Fate for a little bit in that one of the successes that you can always get, like if you have an extra success or if you get momentum, you can spend that to obtain information. This is not a list of questions. It is very open-ended, and the game encourages that so that people can ask questions and aim towards those hypotheses or ask about a weird aspect. You can get that kind of PBTA collaboration in answering those questions and figuring those things out. That's where I think it feels like it's handling that and giving the GM and players room to kind of work together to aim towards, okay, this is weird, what's going on here, let's work that out.
Which is a really fun aspect of Star Trek.
Yeah. The other secret sauce I'll mention is you play your main character, your captain or your engineer or so on, but built into the game is the idea that if your main characters are like down on the planet, but somebody's main character isn't, you create a supporting character. It's a very quick system to pick that up, and you actually put that in the record. And eventually you build up this cast of supporting NPCs that can come and go, and they get their own stories told. And maybe later somebody will pick them up as a main character, and they get advancements. Every time they appear on screen in an episode, that supporting character gets a little advancement. People really like that. It has been a really awesome way to build up the cast and let the players say, okay, who is our junior science officer? Who is our transporter chief? I've dug that.
I love that so much. I know that you're going to do your deep dive on Star Trek, but can I ask you a quick question about Rapscallion?
Absolutely, yeah.
We're about to play in a Rapscallion campaign starting in October, I think. I wanted to ask you, as players, what is the one thing that you think we should be leaning into to really make Rapscallion sing?
I really leaned into it hard as fantasy pirates. Weird stuff, like really leaning into Tim Powers' Dial to 11 and weird stuff. People are changed by the magics. Everything is touched by some kind of eldritch nature or weird nature or arcane nature. I think that is what makes Rapscallion shine. The other thing is they do give you places where there's a lot of space to figure out how you're going to do it. You have shipboard combats, but it kind of abstracts back. So you need to kind of think about how you want to mechanize that. Like I ended up taking one of the moves and making it kind of an approach roll before we go into the ship combat. Looking at the vices that they have as conditions, those are really fun. at first you're like, oh, I don't want to take those. But all of them are interesting because they cause an effect and you define when you get them how you clear them. So that creates an automatic storyline thing. Like our captain, I gave them an angry, and you're only going to get that cleared when you dress down the other players. And so that creates a scene for them or a tension. The last little thing I'll say is it's kind of mentioned in passing as mechanic, and I've used it and it has worked against my better judgment. They say, as the fate, you can apply a bonus or a penalty to a roll. Now, in PBTA, that's not something I usually would do, is say, oh, you get an additional +1 or -1. But that has worked. It has worked to create extra tension and things, or when they kind of need it and it feels like it's something that would be good, they've done some work to build something up. Because this world is a fickle world driven by fate and magic, it feels right.
No, I really like that.
There are those factions that are in the book. I made some additional ones to give players some choice, and we kind of did some collaborative building on that, and that was super fun. I have one player who's super into nautical ship stuff, and so this is absolutely his jam, and he is pulling everyone else along in his wake with his enthusiasm. So
I love that. That's so cool.
I am going to move on to our second segment. For our second segment, we ask everyone to talk about something that they're digging right now and kind of tell us why briefly. So, Josh, what is giving you life?
When I was at school, I was very much not the sporty person. I couldn't do ball games. So, at school it's ball games, so you don't get to be identified as sporty. But in the last few years, I've picked up mixed martial arts and I've picked up bouldering. For a couple of months, I had a really bad shoulder injury and I couldn't do as much of it as I wanted to. So I've kind of just come back to doing that stuff. And I'm really excited to get back into it. We live in the Peak District in the UK where there's like loads and loads of good climbing. And as a result, it's kind of become a climbing mecca.
Oh, wow.
The city of Sheffield, which is like a 15-minute drive away from us, has got zillions of climbing gyms. And therefore, there is one which is like really easy for us to access and get there in that 15-minute drive. It's problem solving. It's exercise that isn't boring, which is the main reason for me not doing exercise in my earlier part of my life, is that I found it boring. Yeah, it's really great.
That sounds amazing. Becky, what is giving you life?
Well, it's September, and I am one of those really annoying people that for me, spooky season starts on the 1st of September. I'd push it back even earlier if I could. I love the build up to Halloween. It's my favorite holiday out of all of them. So for me, it is just going to be 2 solid months of horror and magical witches and demons and all of that stuff. But what is really particularly giving me life this spooky season, and I do say spooky season starts on the 1st of September, when I was a child in the 80s and 90s, the paranormal investigations, they're nowhere near as sophisticated as they are now, but they were a thing. I read tons and tons of books, but now there's so many amazing podcasts and YouTube channels, and there's 2 in particular real life ghost haunting podcasts that I want to give a shout out to. The first one is Uncanny on the BBC with Danny Robbins, which I absolutely love. And the second one is Into the Fog podcast on Spotify by Peter Laws. I think both of them are just doing such a good job of the storytelling element of a ghostly haunting. As I'm absolutely mainlining those at the moment, which means, of course, the second it gets dark, I'm just scared my own pants off. Every single bump and noise, but I just love it and I just can't get enough of them. Yeah, that's what's giving me life and will continue to do so until the 1st of November.
Awesome. On Crunchyroll and the other anime services, there's a lot of things that have come back for second seasons that Sherry and I have some stuff we've been rewatching. The only one right now that we've seen that has grabbed us the new season is called Secrets of the Silent Witch. And it is based on a light novel series, and they also did a manga. And basically, there is this incredibly awkward, shy, high sage wizard, and she has learned how to not chant her magic, which nobody else can do. And she's done that because she doesn't like talking to people. And she's one of the high sages, but she is assigned to go do this bodyguard duty for a prince who's at essentially a magic school. She looks young enough that she can fit in, and she's learning to interact with people and accept her own powers. And she's also super clever. There's a lovely magic system. This rarely happens. Like, I'm pretty good with, okay, a 12 episode season. I can handle that. But this one, as we've hit, I think, episode 11, I'm like, I so wish this was 24 or 26 episodes because I can't wait. And I don't usually do this, but I broke down and ordered the light novels to read those because I'm just enjoying it so much. The characters are great. There's some turns that it makes that are super surprising and good and heartbreaking. It's really interesting. One of my favorite animes this season.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
Listeners, that's our show. Josh, Becky, tell us if people want to track you down. Obviously, we'll have the link to things in the show notes, but beyond the Kickstarter campaign, where can people find you?
So our website is at www.blackarmada.com. And obviously we're on itch.io as well, if you want to go over there and search up Black Armada. I think that the places that you can find us best are going to be Blue Sky. And on Blue Sky, I am at Becky Annison, all one word, .bsky.social. Josh is at Armada Josh, all one word, at bsky.social. And we also have our own Discord as well, where I hate to say it, probably end up talking about food more than anything else.
No, fair enough.
So true.
But there is definitely game chat that goes on over there, as well as food chat. Did I miss anything, Josh?
If you're going down the full list, we have a Patreon. You can come and read us talk about the games we're developing as we're writing them. So, like, you could have been hearing about Ex Tenebris for like a couple of years or something. We have an actual play podcast, Black Armada Tales, where you can listen to us play. We're currently playing Ex Tenebris. We've played an awful lot of games which are dear to the Open Hearth community's heart, I'm sure. I think we bring a kind of Open Hearth sort of vibe to the way we play. You know, there's quite a focus on relationship drama alongside often horror-themed action and investigation.
Thank you so much. The Open Hearth podcast is, of course, a production of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. We have an online gaming calendar where folks can sign up for our sessions. As we're recording this, we are just getting ready for Shared Hearth, which happens that first weekend in October. This is a free online gaming con, and we have signups that by the time this episode drops are open, but you should check out the calendar. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. We've got about 40 games and a couple of seminars on the calendar. It's one of our largest ones so far. And again, it is free. If you've listened to the show and are interested in this kind of games and gaming, you should check that out. As well, if you've enjoyed the show, consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/openhearthgaming.com. We have a Discord where we talk about games, and there's a lot of people doing spoiler tags about Star Wars and Star Trek and things like that. There's a lot of TV show talk there. We're also on Blue Sky, Tumblr, and we have a Mastodon Dice Camp. And all of that you can find out more about at openhearthgaming.com. Becky, Josh, admire your work immensely, so this is a real pleasure for me. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting us on.
We love the Open Hearth so much.
Thank you, everyone. And listeners, that is our show.